Welcome, Tiny Hands Big Dreams, here on the homestead in southern Ecuador. So, I'm going to show you how I made a chainsaw lumber mill for about $30 in parts total. Automatic. I'm going to take this junky old log, it's been laying out in the shrubs for a while. I'm going to turn it into this totally usable piece of wood that's actually square and smooth. I'm going to show you how I build the carriage, put it all together. I'm going to show you how to modify the bar. It's pretty easy stuff. Again, total cost is about 30 bucks. That's the guide bar. So let's go ahead and make one. Chainsaw. This is a MS250 steel. I bought it secondhand off a neighbor here. It already had some hours on it. It is considered a little chainsaw, and I kind of like that. There are some people that use even a smaller one for this operation with the nice thin blade. There are some that use much larger ones and they go through it faster. I just like the lightweight. I can use it all day. I can do silly things with it. It works out well for this. Now, setting that aside, I have the carriage. On the side of the carriage there is another backup plastic washer. And this is just a piece of plywood that I have cut, again, to divide the force so that I do not crush the carriage. So it's just evenly applying force, give me a nice big surface area for that blade to sit and not wiggle. Everything you can do to make it not wiggle aids to the accuracy. Handle. The handle, when it's in operation, is so I can pull on it. If I don't have enough angle of my log, then we put a couple of fingers here, and I will give it just the littlest bit of pressure to drag it along. Ideally, I like it to do all of its own work. I like no input forces for me. Everything I do causes inaccuracy. That's just it. Gravity is what gravity is. Its force is what it is. If you leave it alone, it will do the same cut down the whole board. If you get in and you pull, you don't, you this, you that, you get less accurate. Okay. On this side, I have a series of hooks, just bent out of some cheap steel. And I have another one that's just wired to my handle here. When this is in operation, as it tilts, I take the hook and I start, I think I start on this one. That gets me this angle. And then if I go for my second cut, I come down, it gets me this angle. And then a final cut, I'm usually down here and it's near vertical. This is because with the plastic bushing, the plastic washers that I have in here, the vibration, the blade tends to just walk more shallow over the cut. Even though this is incredibly tight, there's just very little friction of this plastic on oiled wood surface, which is nice. So I simply give it a little bit of a fixed pull to set it in each position. Now, what else do we have here? So I found out that just hanging the chainsaw on the carriage torqued the carriage, which caused, again, more inaccuracy. So I put a little basket here, which I've attached with some washers. This is just to hold a bag of rocks. And it's a rice bag, actually. And I take the bag of rice full of rocks. Seems to be about the right weight for this. It's just more than the chainsaw. Settles the carriage right down to my guide. And by doing so, sits flat, doesn't try to rock over. Sitting flat on flat is nice and accurate, and it will just walk itself down. Works out. There's a piece of wood that is attached to the carriage merely as support for said basket. And another washer, the back of the bolt. Now the bolt, I'll show you that, is actually two, they were like 5 or 6 inch bolts that I just welded the heads together. And there's just a weld joint there. And by doing so, I have essentially a double threaded rod. You could use a piece of all thread. I didn't have any available, so I welded 2 bolts, and that works out. And that essentially is the whole carriage. It is very important that this dimension is exactly parallel on both sides, that these pieces are parallel to each other, and that this dimension is exactly the same as your guide rod. And this is, some people will use a nice piece of 2x4. Sure, as long as your 2x4 is really straight, really stable, dry, isn't going to warp, has friction. I got 2 pieces of square steel, clamped them nicely, stitch welded it. It's very smooth. It's very rigid. It has very little bending action, and I can slide right down that and hold that. So all I had to do was take the centerpiece and cut it to be precisely the same as my 2 pieces of steel, and I bolt the whole thing together. So, with that being said, the only other modification is right here. Normal chainsaw, there's only 1 hole in the bar. I have to add a 2nd hole. So, let's do that. It is important to use, ideally, a brand new blade, brand new chain, and a good bar. If your bar is all worn out and wonky, it will affect things. I run a heavy oil. Sometimes I'll even run manual transmission gear oil for the oil. It's a little thick. Sometimes I'll run a straight 40 weight, but versus other people that I've seen, they use motor oil or just motor oil, or and their bar starts to wear out a bit and the chain wanders. So with big fancy setups, with like the proper Alaskan chainsaw mill, everything is held more rigidly, and you can get away with more worn components. Because this is so inexpensively built, you have to have nicer components you can't really have a wonky chain trying to pull the cut off sideways. You don't have enough structure to just hold it in place. So with that being said, let's talk about the cost. I had the chainsaw. If I had to buy it, these are $200 and some currently. Okay, that's what that is. The basket, I paid $3. The pieces of wood, it's $3 for a 3-meter section. We're going to go ahead and call it $1 worth of wood. It is covered with linseed oil, either linseed or tongue. I'm not sure what I used. I used pieces of plywood for the side because I had a piece of scrap sitting around, but if I didn't, this is 3/4 inch ply. I've used about a square foot. I don't know. All told, this is a couple dollars. Oh yeah, the 2 bolts at 50 cents a piece. Did it cost $4? $5, $6? Something like that. It wasn't a ton. The real expense was the steel tubing, which I wanted longer than my longest cut. So I think I did them at 10 or 11 feet. I wanted it to overhang the wood on whatever I was cutting on both sides. So that was 2 pieces of steel at $12 each, 24. So we're probably at $30. $30 all told, put it together. I had a welder to do the stitch weld. If you didn't, if you could find someone that has a welder, it's just a couple little stitches. It's 10 minutes of work. You may have to pay for that. It's just a stick welder. It's nothing too fancy. But let's call it a $30 jig. I think that's right. So let's go ahead and modify the bar, because that's the only modification except for the 2 pieces of wire. 2 pieces of wire. One here, one here. That is 1 unit. That's to hold my angle. There's one more, and that is this guy. Once I get it in a cut and I'm happy with it, my hand is already here. I'm already holding the trigger. I pull this piece of wire up and I lock the throttle open. Some will argue that this is an unsafe practice. You should never do that. You should never. That's fair. If it's your chainsaw and you're doing what you want to do, you can do whatever you want. So I lock it open. It's nicely contained on the jig. If anything goes wrong, I'm over there by a few feet. And it sits and it runs. And I'll show you that. And it'll just run cut after cut after cut. If the blade were to explode, I'm over there. I can come over and disconnect it. And it's as simple as pull the trigger, pop it off, she stops. I can flip the off switch, also fair. But it means I'm not holding it. And a lot of this is continue holding of chainsaw causes people problems, joints and nerves over length of time. It is what it is. You make your choices. So let's go ahead and modify a blade. All right. So let's get a quick close up here of the two blades side by side. Factory hole. One more hole. Super worn out chain, tiny teeth. New chain. This still cuts. It does okay. I use it to knock down trees and chop up stuff. It's almost done. But for this operation, we're just going to put the new chain on. So here is an identical new bar. Here is my well-loved old bar, which actually, when you put the chain in here, it doesn't have much wiggle at all because, yeah, use good oil. This is the hole we need. This hole should be the same size as the bolt that you use across your carriage. You could use 1/4 inch, 5/16, 3/8, something in that range. It's not super important. The bigger it is, the bigger you have to drill the hole, though. So we're going to start in my collection of questionable drill bits of questionable sharpness. This is hardened steel. Now, some will argue you can't drill this. Some will argue that you need to detemper the metal, you need to get the spot hot. Others will say just use a cobalt infused drill bit, which is what I did last time. So I got close, and I got the right size, but I could not do one size over just because that drill bit is made of a lesser steel than this. So I got it close. Soft drill bit's just not going to work. Don't ever forget you have chainsaw files. You should have chainsaw files if you have a chainsaw. So just spent about 5 minutes, maybe less, and I filed it down just to get myself a little clearance. There it is. Slides on and off easy. Doesn't have any play. Tiny bit of play, just enough to get it on and off. That play is not so important. It's not going to move around that way. That's good. All right, moving on. New blade on. Set tension. That's great. So now let's go ahead and assemble the carriage for the saw. So, spacer. Important to keep the carriage from rubbing against this. this friction washer. That is just going to go on first. Boom. The other side of the bar, second friction washer. Big fat steel washer. This is all just to keep this from doing any sort of flex in operation. So I divide all my squeezing force over a larger area. Small nut, or small washer, 2 nuts, primary and a backup. Okay. Bangs are tight, and then a little bit more. If I had to guess, I'm probably at 20, 25 pounds of pressure. Backup, just to lock it all in place. And that's my carriage. It's stiff, but it moves smoothly. There's no play there. All right. I don't know why they don't come with a way to attach your wrench that you need all the time. So, with that all together, let's go cut some stuff. All right. You got to start somewhere. You got to get at least a couple places to sit on. Now that's all right. It's not great. It might get a little better. I'd have to take a long, skinny slice off that. All right, so first cut was just to get the steel on the top. It doesn't have to be a lot. That's the beauty of using steel versus a piece of wood. It's got really good rigidity. The double box tube, I think, is better than a single piece of box tube. I think you have better torsional strength. It doesn't twist. So now we come and we look at our cut, and I don't know, that's pretty good. Now, this cut is only to twist the log and then put the steel on. That is our new top. That's all I was really doing. But we now have a beautiful flat top. We're gonna go ahead and give this a turn, set the steel, and then we're gonna start making a 90-degree cut on the other side, and we'll try to get the beginnings of a chunk of wood out of this. All right. It's not bad. All right. Cut number 2. So there's our guide. And there's our cut. Square, even, smooth. A little bit of texture. Very nice. Now continue it for the other 2 sides, and we'll have ourselves a postie. Hi there. So, now we need our fancy tape measure and our fancy impacty drill, because if I just go and eyeball this side and take a cut to get rid of the bad and lose some of this, I'm going to get a piece of wood that is not parallel. Works for post, but I'd like it to be parallel. So down here is my problem. I've got 3/4 of an inch and 3/4 of an inch. I think I have about 1.5 inches to my cut. I come in and I look at this, I'm like, all right, 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches. You got this big scalloped area. 1.5 inches. I just cleaned the bark there and there. So, go ahead and pick one there. 2 1/16. 2 1/16. Huh. Yeah, there it is. Pretty close. So now that I am parallel this side, this is my distance guide, which it will follow. Let's see. Nope, moved. Two and a 16th. So now we should be dead parallel with our new cut. So I've got a couple screws up there, one down here, throw one over here. There. Bueno. Not sure what the wood is. It's a big tall tree. This we dropped 6 months ago before we started. I'll try to get you a close up here. The closest I can figure is balsa wood. It's real light. I can dent it with a fingernail. It's kind of soft. When you sand it up, it's really pretty actually. It's pretty strong. I've made some bits and pieces around our house that were thin and long, and they're actually quite rigid while being very light. Kind of like the stuff. All right, less than half a tank. Less than half a tank. Fill it again. I think it's important to not disturb the cut mid-process. I try not to touch it or put any external force on it. And if it were to sputter and die, the forces would change. And the blade could, by that measure, move around. It can torque in, it can torque out. So this is a very inexpensive setup. It is not fancy in any way. And because of that, you have to take a little more care in some of the setup and in the practice of doing it. That's also why a new blade and bar help. It just eliminates, that extra little variable. If your chain wants to pull left or right, that is going to mess with it. It'll wander out and then dig back in. Nobody wants that. All right, let's get into it. All right. It's pretty easy, not a lot of surprises. Some ants came out of here that I don't enjoy. They're larger, they have like a stripy butt. They hurt like the absolute gosh. Bit by the sun itself. Do not enjoy the stripy butts. They'd actually made a little home in here in the months it's been sitting out. That's what it is. I probably cut most of them in half. So that's that. So now we have one side left. Got three pretty square. Ideally, I would flip back to my first side and spin the log around and then recut. It likes to go downhill, so you want to cut on this side. And I would spin it around to not get the accumulated error of whatever imperfect the saw is in its joining angle. Is it a 90.000? No. Especially under load. It's something slightly off. So there's an accumulated error. And rather than add it another time, I could flip it around and then we're very close. Yeah. All right, that's good for that cut. Pops off. There we go. I have made a suitable postie for something. Now this was the wonkiest log in the world. It's got its issues, but it is a solid postie. Or maybe I'll cut it up and make something smaller out of it. That's what I did to these over there a while back. That was me just playing around when I built the thing. Because now I could just take it, and I take this and I measure from this edge, and I subtract plus the blade thickness, whatever I want. So if I wanted a 1-inch board, I'm going to move 1 and is it 5/16 for the blade that way, and then I take a cut, and then I get my 1-inch board by whatever I made it. That's the chainsaw mill. Now, I'll show you the tree it came from. That bastard way up there. Let's see if we can get you a little better. Now this one is full of air plants, which are a cool thing. In fact, there's more air plants than tree up there. But that is the other one that was left, and that one's not a danger to our house. So that one stayed. There we go. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, and we'll see you for the next one.